Hey guys, welcome back, it's Ripe again. In today's story, an entitled neighbor Karen stole my motorcycle while I was in the hospital and tried to get me arrested for taking back my property. Here is what happened. Subscribe to Ripe on YouTube and hit the bell to turn on notifications. I really try to believe that humanity is still capable of behaving and treating others with respect. But an experience that I had not that long ago while I was down in the dumps makes me really think that most people are entitled as hell. This encounter has to do with me, my beloved motorcycle, and my neighbor, Karen. Now, before this, Karen and I were on decent terms. We were not friends by any means, but we were neighborly. I did know that she had quite the reputation in the neighborhood for being a Karen. I did not ever have any problems with her, but I'm a surprisingly good neighbor compared to most people. Even if I drove a noisy motorcycle, I tried to be mindful about driving it at night when people were sleeping. As a matter of fact, I had a regular Toyota Corolla just because of that reason. Karen had made a few comments before about how beautiful my bike was and how her husband used to ride a motorcycle back in the day. It was never more than just a friendly conversation, and I certainly never thought that she was hinting that she wanted it or anything like that. I remember one of my other neighbors who had problems with Karen claimed that Karen stole some yard decorations out of her yard the previous summer, although they could not prove it. She said that her lawn decorations went missing and then she saw some remarkably similar ones in Karen's yard just a few days later, but they looked like they had been spray painted. Well, a little less than a year ago, I started to experience some pretty serious health problems that landed me in the hospital. I was devastated as I really felt like my life was put on hold. I was stuck in a hospital for about a week and a half and I hated it. Don't get me wrong, I'm extremely grateful to the nurses and doctors that helped me, but damn, I never thought I would be dealing with such problems in my mid-20s. I still had a life to live. The whole time I could not wait to get out, see my friends and ride my motorcycle. I knew when I got out, I would not be able to ride for a while, but I knew the sooner I got out, the sooner I could go back to riding. I finally get released from the hospital and I cannot wait to go back home to my motorcycle. My brother came to pick me up, hospital rules, and on the way to my house he was asking me where I had put my bike. I told him that I had left it in the driveway. If I knew I was going to the hospital, I would have put it in my backyard or garage. He looked at me like he was confused and was saying that when he went to go pick up some clothes and whatnot for me before he came to pick me up, he did not see my motorcycle in the driveway. Now, at this point, I am extremely tired, and although I'm sure I put the motorcycle in my driveway, I was also running on a couple of hours of sleep at night while in the hospital. As a matter of fact, I fell asleep in the car after that. My brother was going to stay with me for a while to make sure I was okay anyway. However, the next day I had woken up and I heard my brother talking to my neighbor. I very carefully went downstairs and went to see what they were talking about. Karen had actually stolen my bike and my neighbor saw it. Now, I know I was feeling pretty weak and tired, but that was my bike and it was my life. I had gone over there with my brother and asked Karen about the bike. Of course, she claimed that she had no idea about what we were talking. I told her that I had several witnesses that saw her steal the bike, and if she was willing to give it back, then I was not going to press charges. However, she kept denying. At this point, my neighbor had followed us and looked over Karen's fence to see my bike in her backyard. When she yelled this out, Karen slammed the door shut in our faces and ran off. I called 911 and explained to them the situation. While this is happening, my brother hops on the fence and attempts to start the motorcycle, which could not work because the keys were not in it. Karen was not aware that I called 911 and called the police herself too, shouting that a bunch of goons are trying to steal my motorcycle. Karen then came running out of her house with a taser and tried to hit my brother with it, meanwhile shouting that we are dirty thieves. Now, when the police came, of course my brother got a word from the police about trespassing, but the police were able to find the motorcycle keys, which I could prove were mine because I had a special keychain with my mom's picture. They asked me if I wanted to press charges, and of course I said yes. Karen also doesn't have a motorcycle license or even a regular driver's license, so that was another charge on her. I did end up getting my motorcycle back and now it stays in my garage no matter what. And yeah guys, as many of you know, I am a motorcycle aficionado, so if something like this happened to me, I would be absolutely devastated. But thank God here in Thailand, people don't really steal motorcycles, so I don't have to worry too much about that. The next one is titled, I am done with my neighbors. Oh man, this is more of a vent for me, but I finally lost my mind recently. Long story short, when they moved in a year ago, the husband and I were cool. He said he would remove a fence dividing our homes, semi-detached, since it looks like complete crap and is falling over, and we would put bushes dividing the homes instead. Seems like a good idea, right? Well, back in mid-March, it was 11 PM and their kids were running around screaming as usual. So my girlfriend went and knocked on the door and nicely asked if they could keep the noise down as we are trying to sleep. By law also states no noise after 9 PM and no noise ever that is unreasonable that can be heard in another dwelling. Well, the wife and husband took this as a major insult for a simple request and ever since they have been major a-holes. Today I saw the wife and 2 kids and I very nicely asked, since they were planting bushes on their side of the fence, if we could remove the chain link at our own cost. Well, she immediately went into a tirade of how it was her fence and their property and that we cannot do anything. So I asked, it divides the 2 properties, how is it yours? Secondly, your husband said last year he was going to remove it, which is why I am asking if you don't mind if we take care of it for you guys. Then she gets loud and yells, our property, go to hell. So I said, fine, you wanna act like a Karen? Then go ahead. Maybe you should learn how to talk to people in a civil manner instead of being a Karen all the time. So I went inside and 20 minutes later, I come out to use my vape and make a phone call. The mother-in-law comes out with the husband yelling and screaming at me asking why I called her a bitch. So I said, it's just an observation, one that is very clearly obvious considering I asked a simple question which did not need to be answered with attitude. Mother-in-law says, well, why would you put your patio furniture on your front deck? It sees right into their home. My response, first off, it faces out to the road, and second, I could not give a F less about what they have in their home. And if they think I'm spying on them, they should get their heads checked in case they are schizophrenic. And lastly, just like how the fence is your property, so is my deck and I can arrange my patio furniture however the hell I want. The husband starts screaming that my girlfriend is fat, and so am I. I'm definitely not even close to being overweight, by the way, to which I politely responded with, you know what man, I'm trying to be neighborly with you, and yet you throw personal insults at me when you're the one who is always screaming at your wife and kids. You sure are setting a good example for your kids to grow up thinking it's okay to insult people based on their looks when maybe you should look at yourself since your wife looks miserable every day, but with a husband like you and 2 kids, I could see why. So you know what, I'm done trying to be nice. I hope you got permits for all the structural work you did to your home, because now I am done with you guys. I'll be calling the city about that, the fence and your back fence you built over the legal limit. And don't think for a second that I'm going to move, because anytime I hear you make a noise now, I will call bylaw, and anytime I hear you screaming at your wife like you usually do, I'll call the cops for domestic disturbance. And don't think I don't. The city has been emailed immediately after this, and I do know they are very quick to respond to things like this. If what they did is in fact done without a permit, they could be facing up to 50k in fines. Oh, and yes, before anyone asks, for the work we are doing, I got permits beforehand just in case. And Ripe Stars, I'm curious, if you would have been caught up in such an annoying conflict, what would you have done? Would you have done the same SOP? Let us know in the comments. The next one is titled, Never Steal My Property. Do you also have these neighbors that are kind of nice, but can also be super jealous if you are successful? I got one of these folks in my neighborhood. As in watching in rage as any financial gain would come in my way and make disparaging comments about my monetary habits. For example, they would poke fun at my shopping habits while running into me at Walmart and laugh at me not owning a car but several motorcycles. Meanwhile she, for the female, has a rather large family, a very small house, 3 cars and low income. I would offer non-monetary assistance in any way possible, borrowing tools, giving food, gifts, offering to pitch in making repairs, etc. In 2020, I was able to work from home and I lived alone in a terrible neighborhood. My home was targeted to be burglarized a ton of times. So then I decided to install security cameras, and when I did, I noticed unusual activity from her house. People watching my home after hours, entering my yard, etc. I knew they were having hard times, so I offered to help, but I did not think they were plotting to steal from me. I just thought I was being paranoid. Then I woke up to find my moped stolen. I reviewed the security footage, saw her son enter my yard, pushed down my camera, and law enforcement was no help. During the next criminal interaction, I used a firearm in self-defense, and this neighbor went to court and testified against me. It's important to note that we had a relatively good relationship prior to this. Now her house has always been a code enforcer's wildest dream. Every window broken, electrical wires exposed, and a massive hole in the roof/ceiling. Before I would just offer to help, give tools and suggest cheap handyman, in 2021 I called DCF and let them know the conditions were unlivable for the children present. My reports went ignored, and because it was not raining, so the full damage was easy to cover with tarp. But in 2022, the rain came, and it came hard. There was sheer panic and rage as the entire family was panicking to make spot repairs. Effin' carpe diem. I called CPS/code enforcement and anyone else that would lend an ear. Within 24 hours, police, social workers and inspectors were swarming the house, and I was outside pointing and laughing the entire time. I also submitted the footage of her forcing the kids to make the repairs and hitting them. Now, a new roof costs about 17k, but to replace half the roof costs around 7k. I know for a fact each window costs about $450 for the permit material and labor, and a whole lot less if you take the unreliable do-it-yourself approach. Each time they would go ahead and make a repair, I would call the city and let them know work was being done without a permit, forcing them to halt works pre-form. With them being perpetually unemployed, I knew they would have to go to desperate measures to afford the work. I gleamed in awe as they tried to sell their belongings and cried about selling plasma to afford the work. Finally, code enforcement said the roof was repaired to their standards, but by then the emotional and financial damage was done and the laugh was over. They are still financially recovering, and my new expensive and excessive purchases have further flaunted my position. I'm not concerned about them stealing anymore because they know I am capable of defending myself, I no longer live alone, and I have drastically limited my generous behavior. I just enjoy watching them mope around envious of a lifestyle they could never afford. The next one is titled Ex-Girlfriend Gets It Back. This is an old story. A while back I was dating this girl for roughly 2 years. I thought things were going great, but apparently she was just dating me because she liked to tell people she was in a relationship. No, that is how it went with her. The way she described me was too immature, decent in bed, and honestly not worth the rest of my life. Exact words she said to a friend of hers after we broke up. Anywho, I'm getting ahead of myself. I went out, bought a ring, and had this entire thing planned out to propose to her. However, she was suddenly not available for several weeks in a row. Well, my fears rang true as she suddenly showed up at my place one day. She acted like everything was normal as we talked, and she was grabbing everything that was hers. About halfway through, I just kind of looked at her and said, "Don't forget your hairdryer. It would be awkward to have to come back over after you dumped me." This sparked a long and awkward conversation where she was fake crying. I had realized right then and there that I was an idiot. The way she acted, the way she spoke, and the way she treated me just screamed that she didn't care. I was devastated, but seeing her made me angry. I had realized she was lying to me this entire time. About a month later, a friend of hers called me up and asked if she could come over to talk. I asked why, and she said my ex pissed her off and she wanted to tell me some things. My mind goes to horrifying things like she needs to warn me I need to see a doctor or things like that. Well, her friend came over and we chatted for a while. See, her friend was beyond pissed off, talking, ending the relationship pissed off at her. So her way to get back at her friend was to sleep with her ex-boyfriend. Me being in my mental state, I said yes, more like I said, sure, yeah, we can do that if you really want to. So she ends up staying over for a few days as we get to talking about my ex. I tell her about the ring and she had the best idea to get back at my ex. Let's lay down in bed and post a picture of ourselves with the ring in between us. Yeah, I thought it was a terrible idea, but I wanted my ex to feel like crap, so well, there you go. Not even 2 hours later, my ex was at the door. We posted the picture at like 11 AM and she was at my place at 12:40 something. Right off the bat, she tried to act like breaking up with me was a mistake. She said that I was the best boyfriend she ever had and she was getting scared with how serious things were getting. She said she made a terrible mistake in breaking up with me. Well, her friend immediately goes into a rant about my ex, saying that she was manipulative and that neither of us would believe this sob story she was giving. I gotta say, I am very glad her friend was there because my stupid ass was believing my ex. I reminded her of how she treated me when she broke up and that she should go home. She was wasting her time. Well, now she brought up the ring, said she owed it under the law, said that rings are gifts and that I cannot take it back. In unison, me and her friend said that I never gave it to her. We both looked at each other and laughed a bit as the absurdity of the situation was getting outrageous. She said she was owed that ring and that she was not leaving without it. At about this time, a police officer came up the stairs wanting to know what the trouble was. I guess we made enough noise that neighbors called the police. The female officer asked what the situation was. Everyone tried to talk at once and the officer shut us down, pointed to my ex and asked her what the problem was. She said she was trying to pick up her stuff after we broke up. She asked me if it were true. I explained the situation, how my ex broke up with me before I had the chance to propose and that she was never given the ring. Throughout the conversation, 2 more officers showed up, one a supervisor. The whole story was explained like 4 times. At one point my ex said that the money from the ring will let her pay off her car. Ever see a moment when someone says something so outrageous that everyone looks at them in utter disgust? I responded with that the ring is not expensive, it was bought used off of a website, and I reminded her that I am an IT tech, so this was not a ring that was 10 to 12k, more like 1 to 1.5k. The anger and rage that came over her face was immediately apparent to everyone. She stepped forward and punched me in the chest and kicked at me before being tackled to the ground by the female officer. The supervisor on scene told us to go inside while they get her under control. We did, and about 10 minutes later they came back. They wanted my statement. I told them I didn't want to press charges against her, but they said, yeah, it doesn't work like that. We saw it, so it's being processed. She ended up getting misdemeanor offenses for it. And I guess by that OP means that she has gotten a misdemeanor offense charge or something like that. But yeah guys, breaking up with your significant other, especially when he or she wanted to propose, and then after breaking up demanding to get the ring, that's simply not how it works. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video and I see you again tomorrow.